into his neighbor's house during a psychotic episode, was naked, crawled in the bathtub, and of course, people called the police. What happens in that situation typically? It doesn't end well with people. Officers get hurt, but also the people being subdued or need intervention don't get the help. In this case, the officer who responded had been trained in what's called crisis intervention and recognized the symptoms of mental illness. Did not draw the service weapon, talked him down, got him to the right type of health care. So why doesn't that happen across the country? And what's preventing it? Turns out there's a city called Miami-Dade in Florida, it's a county, and they said, hey, you know what happens if we train all our officers in crisis intervention? What happens if we get them, instead of going to those jails, we get them into the right medical facilities? What does that start to look like? And so they set up this system, and they said, hey, let's compare our data between our healthcare system and our criminal justice system. And it'll move only from criminal justice to healthcare to ensure privacy, security, and all the protections. Because remember, we have not left out responsibility. And in that case, this is not rocket science, data science, machine learning, or any of the whiz-bang stuff. This is literally, hey, do you see Sally on your list? Do you see Jesse on your list? Do you see Juan on your list? Whoever. And they say, yeah, that person we see all the time. They constantly go in the system. Don't arrest them. Take them to the crisis. Cost them $1.5 million to train everyone. First year of rolling out the program, they saved more than $10 million. The real measure is they closed a jail. 2 years later, they closed another jail. Simply by sharing data, by opening up the data. That transformation is remarkable. And that's what enables to roll out the data-driven initiative around criminal justice and all of these things that covers more than 94 million Americans. But we said that's not enough. This is Grace Clark. And I want to take for a moment and look at this photo. Who's in the power position here? How often do you see a young black woman actually telling a police chief what to do? Because he's learning how to write his first line of code. Grace is the boss here. What enables Grace to do that? Open data. The officer, in this case, literally 2 minutes after that, the chief says, that's not right. He says, that's what the data says. He's like, that can't be right. And I said, well, we should better look into that. Exactly. That's what we want to see. So you want to hear a version of this, of how transparency starts to foster a different kind of interaction. But there's more. We looked and started to ask the question of assaults and where police use excessive force. So we put a team of data scientists in a town in the south, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and we said, what could you do? So they started pulling the data. They started doing all this stuff, looking for feature sets, all the basics of machine learning. And they start going through all the data, and they find, oh yeah, an officer uses force. Duh, we see lots of accidents. We see they have lots of complaints, all the usual stuff. But it's a small number of officers. You go halfway down the feature set, and you find something very interesting. There are 2 features that emerge that are high predictors for somebody using excessive force. Number 1, they responded to a domestic violence incident where a child is present. Number 2, they respond to a suicide. In those cases, what's going on? Well, these data scientists are sitting with the officers in the car. They're going to the cases. They are fully embedded. So they look at it and they go, hey, you know, a suicide is physically messy. You go to this home and you're seeing these kids in this domestic violence. This is high emotional. And then what happens is you finish out the case and you're asked to go back out on the street and go pull somebody over with a broken taillight and they get flippant with you. What's our human response? The dispatch system has no ability to give an officer decompression. Are we making technology work for the officer as well? In this case, can we ask the system? We can figure out how to dynamically route a package in 24 hours, but we can't ask it to figure out how to give an officer enough time off to go from a high emotional incident. This is the stuff that we can do. We have to figure out how do we make our technology work for us not against us, not as just individuals, but as an entire society. And that begins with all of us. I'll give you another example. This is Jennifer Bittner, her husband Rod, and her son. She has now 2 sons. She wrote into us at the White House and to President Obama. She has stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. She was doing okay. And it's obviously for anybody that's had their lives touched by cancer, know this is a horrific condition. And she pointed out to Ryan after we launched the Cancer Moonshot with Vice President Biden, she said, "You're not going to go fast enough." I'm like, "Going as fast as we can." She pointed out that she said, at the rate of cancer and the rate of science, if you look at those curves, I will never see my son learn how to ride a bike. You've got to be better than that, don't you? This is the most powerful institution that humanity has ever created, the most technologically civilized society, and we can't muster all our defenses and all of our opportunity to try to find a way to help Jennifer survive? What's behind that? What turns out behind that overall is the fact that there's not just a database of data that's sitting somewhere with Jennifer's information or somebody else's information around cancer. It turns out that there's thousands of databases that are federated and broken up, and nobody's willing to share that data. And that is the premise of what we built around the Cancer Moonshot and what we call the Precision Medicine Initiative, is that we said the fundamental limiter of the advancement of medicine and science right now is the fact that we have data that is fragmented, sitting in distant systems, and nobody can put it together to actually see if a cure has already been found. That is that shift. And I'll give you a very specific, tangible example of that in a second. And so this really gets to the question of what does make America great? Really, what does make America great? And so let me give you a few examples of what I think is what makes America great and what we should take away. This is Matt Might and his son Bertrand. They're with us. We're celebrating Bertrand's birthday at the White House bowling alley. Matt Might is a computer scientist, and his son has a very rare genetic defect. They were only able to figure out because his son did not shed tears. And so Matt went to the doctor and with his wife and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "Oh, it's a rare genetic disorder. Your son is one. The only person like it in the world that ever has this condition." So Matt said, "Well, the hell with that." So he wrote a blog post. He said, titled "Searching for My Son's Killer." And he optimized the blog post for SEO, search engine optimization, so that any other parent who was searching for the same symptoms would find Matt's post and get in contact. And you know what happened? Bertrand is not a sample size of 1. So then they get together and they said, well, let's get our high-value sequencing. And they got it done at Duke University. High quality. They find out, and glycol 1 is where the defect on the genome is. And they start looking at it and they said, hey, you know what, there's all these drugs out there. Why can't we use them for our kids? So literally no joke. This is like something that you see out of a movie. Matt starts to test the drugs on himself. And then tests them on his son. And he has the moment actually pictured. He has actually the video of it the very first time that his son sheds tears. Because one person, empowered with data, motivated to create a community, can bring change not just for his son, but an entire population that has no recourse. That's the beginning of what it means when we take a technology and we start revolutionizing it for everybody. Now, there's a huge amount of challenges around that, around pharmaceutical drug pricing and everything. I don't want to say that like this is just the end all, but this is the start. It's the start of the domino. Sonia, behind Eric there, they're married. Sonia mom had a genetic disease that horrifically killed her. It's a very, very painful disease to watch someone waste away that way. Sonia has a 50% likelihood of this disease manifesting. So they gave up their careers as a lawyer and a city planner to retrain as one is the wet lab person, the other person is the data person. Literally to change the course of her life to save her. So they've just decided they're going to do it. And they're doing it all through open data and technology and all the open platforms that we know here. We've brought Presidential Innovation Fellows who come from around the world to bring together and open this new data up. If you go to NOAA and you see all the data on Amazon Cloud and Google Cloud and Microsoft Cloud and Cloud.cloud, what you have, like that program, that was launched by a presidential innovation fellow, Maya Hansen, and Maya Hansen, and they really changed the trajectory of everything here. So people with individual motivation can change this. This is Antwi. Antwi is using local city data at a very high precision level to try to figure out how do you make this data all come together and use it in your local community. This is Sujanta. Sujanta is, we had her at the White House Science Fair. She's 18, 19 roughly in this video, and she's literally chasing down renal failure. She's got this great idea of how to chase down renal failure, kidney disease, and all that market around organ donation costs us in the United States $30 billion a year. She's trying to chase it down. University of Kentucky is so impressed with her work that they've given her an entire lab to run this whole thing. This is, we had this question around the LGBTQ community. And so we brought all that community together at the White House and we said, hey, census form, male, female, what do you want? We said, you know what, there's all sorts of challenges. So we said, why don't you guys come up with a census that you should? And the community decided on their own to figure out what is the LGBTQ, the whole census just for that community. And they're empowering and carrying it forward. This is Tilly. You'll see Tilly has, try that. Tilly there, you'll see her hand grabbing my notebook, is robotic. It's unbelievable that a kid at that age can have a fully robotic hand these days and live a different way. This is Rebecca and Kimberly. I don't know what you were doing when you were 6 and 8, but they launched a toy cat into space. Oh. Actually, I do know what I was doing at 6 and 8, and it was nowhere close. It was anywhere close to getting something into space. This is Steve down there. Steve has an unfortunate disease, but he has slight mobility in his right hand, and he can code still. And so he has built an app with his team to figure out how to find all the sidewalk portions in Chicago that aren't compliant. And there's cracks and there's things, and they're notifying the city to say, hey, come on, this is our town, let's fix this. A guy can do that single-handedly with the data that's out there and technology platforms for today. And one of the things that I'm very proud about is that for the first time in 2 years, the first time in almost 30 years, so twice back-to-back years, our math team, as a mathematician, our math team won the U.S. Gold Olympiad, the Olympiad medals. And that stuff, the number one thing that powered them, they come from all around the community, and the thing that they took away the most is, let's try this. One of the things that they did the most is they all live in different parts around the U.S., and they all communicate through distributed technologies. Hangouts, Skype, etc. And that's how they train. So we don't have to just have something in a local neighborhood. We can think beyond that. This team was a group together. It came together. Some of you may recognize Sean there. That came together, Sean, from Facebook. A bunch of them all came together to address the question of what could we do around veteran suicide? And how do we change the game around suicide? And so we had a national around 5 different spots around the United States to ask how can we use data in novel ways to provide a hackathon for finding solutions. And I don't want to just relay always that everything is just always hunky-dory and awesome at some place like the White House. This young girl is Jake Brewer's daughter. Jake was a really fantastic person and driving a huge component of our open data science efforts at the White House and for the United States. And unfortunately, Jake was killed in a bicycle accident while raising money for cancer. But the second to last email, actually, this is the second to last email of Jake was, what would it look like if data scientists and technologists really decided to take ownership of our country? What does it really look like if all of us, the collective we,
decided to really decide that we're going to own this. We're going to own what it means to be a democratic institution. And so he challenged me to what that pledge would look like. He also challenged me in his last email, how do we play ultimate frisbee on the South Lawn? But, which did not happen, but it may have happened at another secure compound. But this is the pledge. This is the pledge that Jake pushed for. And I think it's just a good one to reflect on for a second. Is I pledge to be an active American, to show up for others, to govern myself, to help govern my community. I recommit myself to my country's creed to cherish liberty as a responsibility. I pledge to serve and to push my country when right, to be kept right when wrong, to set right wherever my ancestors and I were born. I claim America and I pledge to live like a citizen. So what would that look like for us? And so here's my 3 takeaways that I think we start with. The 3 core principles. 3 core principles are people are always greater than data. It's amazing that we can work with these data sets. But remember who those people are. We love to say, oh, that's an edge case. Those edge cases have names. Those edge cases have names. Sally, Juan, Mark, Tanya, they all have names. That's someone's kid, that's someone's father, that's someone's grandfather, grandmother. Let's keep them forefront in our mind when we do things and push ourselves to do that much more for those edge cases. Data is a force multiplier. You are the last place you would expect the data scientist for the country and his team to be involved is in the middle of these questions around community policing. Yet when they get involved, and when all of you get involved in your local community that way, we see a different kind of transformation. And that final bit is we can't wait. The problems of society today and the force that all of you wield is unbelievable. All of us as individuals have a single unique opportunity to transform and change the direction of not just this country, but any country and the entire world. I've seen that a dozen times. And those stories of people hopefully give you a sense of that. And so let me just leave you with this final one, which is the card I used to keep with me at my time in the White House. And it said, the top part says, dream in years, plan in months, evaluate in weeks, and ship daily. And the second part, which is something that Igor and I actually worked on together and came up with, is prototype for 1x, build for 10x, engineer for 100x. And then always asking, in this final part, what's required to cut the timeline in half? And what needs to be done to double the impact? So the final thing I want to leave you with here, this is the final part, is I haven't shown you any data today. I didn't show you any equations. I didn't show you any sort of ROC curves or anything. I just showed you the names and told you the stories of the people whose lives are impacted by data. When we keep people and the people that we are trying to help and build for and change, when you do that, you will see a difference at a level that is unbelievable for what you can be as a force multiplier and what we can be together as a community, as a force multiplier, not to just change things in our company, our local community, but the world entirely. So, thank you.